In this video, we'll be replicating Moho lessons 2-3 and 2-4 in Blender by using curves and object bevels, and even make a shader that simulates basic hair. So fire Blender and let's get started. So let's go over some of the shortcuts that we're going to be using today. We're going to be using Shift-A to add an object or node, R to rotate the curvature of our beziers, G to grab, S to scale, E to extrude new points, right mouse button for subdividing existing points, and we're going to use Alt-S to change the bevel size. We're also going to, obviously, we're going to be using to delete, which we're going to use right now, to get rid of the default cube. Now, in the process of making things, you may have noticed when you hit Shift-A to add something, right underneath Mesh you have Curve, and you have Bezier, Circle, NURBS, etc. And these are a somewhat more spline-based option. However, they do have some modeling advantages and some modeling disadvantages. The main thing is that they are mathematically defined, so let's go ahead and add a Bezier curve. Click on that and we can zoom in, and it's just a simple curve. It just shows you the curvature of the object here. And if we go over to our green data area, we can do things like adjust the detail levels of the geometry or give it a bevel and that sort of thing. But let's look at manipulating a curve. So let's hit Tab, kind of like we would do with a mesh. Now you can see these Bezier lines. Now this is very important when manipulating these lines, is that the manipulation is done perpendicular to the current view. So if I grab this point here and I hit G and I start rotating it, if we circle around, we can see that it's actually gone into the plane a bit. So let's hit Shift Z or Control Z to go out of that. So if we want to limit that, there's a couple of things we can do. One, we can use the Shift key. So let me hit G once again to grab, and then hit Shift Z to restrict to the XY plane. And we can manipulate it that way. But also we can just change our view to the Z plane, grab, and it stays restricted to the Z axis. Now I'm going to hit F12 just for fun, and you notice absolutely nothing is going to come up on the screen. And this is because a curve by itself has no surface to reflect light. We have to sort of assign things to it in order to produce that sort of reflection. Now let's try out a couple of other manipulations. So let's click on this last point here. Let's hit E to extrude, and it gives us another point that we can drag out. And let's hit, just for fun, Shift Z to restrict that to the XY axis. And also, if we click on two of them, hold the right mouse button, hit subdivide, Blender will add a curve without modifying, or add another Bezier point without modifying the geometry, which we can also grab. Let's just grab the one, grab that, and we can adjust that around. Shift Z to restrict that to the XY plane. In order to do something with this curve, we have to assign some other additional geometry to it. So let's tab out of this. So let's try a couple of other geometries. We'll start with the simplest one. If we go to the data here, under geometry, you can see that there's already a default bevel available, which is called round. And by adjusting the depth, we can turn our curve into a tube. And we can adjust the resolution of it, increase that or decrease that. And if we convert this to a mesh later on, this resolution here is going to determine how many meshes or how many faces the final version has. Let's leave it at 4 for now. We're not going to be converting a whole lot of these to meshes. But yeah, you can just get around and adjust the size of it by adjusting the depth. And you go into Tab and you can grab and you can manipulate these. So that's an example of doing one with round. But let's mess around with some other curves. So let's hit Shift-A once again, go to Curve, add another Bezier. It's embedded in this other one. So let's click on this other one and hit Grab and Y and just drag that out of the way for now. So we figured out how to make a tube. That's great. Now, you notice there's an option here for an object. However, this object, there's some limitations to it. This object has to be another curve type. So just for fun, hit Shift-A under Curve, go to the circle, it adds a circle, hit Tab, and you can see this is a complete circle with 4 Beziers. But let's grab this and pull it along the x-axis here, and let's go up to Z to manipulate it. Let's kind of square this off. So if you click on a Bezier and you hit S to change the size, it'll just drag the Bezier lines out. And this is one way that we can really square off our circle here a bit. There we go, a slightly squared off circle. Let's go back to, let's hit tab to go out of that. Click back on our original curve. Also, let's it has to scale that down. Let's shrink that down just a little bit, because that is going to influence how big the curve is once it's extruded along this curve. So let's click on this curve. Now be careful not to mix up the taper object with the bevel object. So we want the bevel object. So let's click on the eyedropper here and click on the Bezier circle, and you can see we've now got an extruded square. And you could use something like this to make, say, for example, gutters, or squared off pipes, junctures, or even corridors. You know, you could turn this into a mesh and have a character walk through this. Okay, so let's take these two objects and let's grab them on the y-axis and set them aside for now. And hit Shift-A, and let's add a new curve. And let's hit Shift-A again and add another curve. Click on one of them and G, Shift-Z to drag it up north here. And let's go up to our Z-axis, tab in, and let's make this a more conventional arch. Okay, now let's go tab out of that. Well, let's hit all and scale to resize that. We want that a bit smaller. So once again, let's go to under bevel, go to object, use the eyedropper to select that arch we just made. And look, we got an arch here. And you could use this to make something like siding or one of those arch-shaped buildings, things like that. And let's have a little additional fun with this. So let's click on one of the points in here and hold down Alt and hit S. And now we can scale the size of the individual points along here, making them bigger or smaller. Tab out of that, select these both with the Shift key, grab along the y-axis, and let's drag that over here. So we've got circle, square, crescent, crescent slash arch. Now let's do one more. Hit Shift-A, bring up another Bezier curve, and hit Shift-A again and bring up a circle. And once again, grab, Shift-Z, drag that circle away. And let's modify this circle a lot. Let's shrink these down really tiny. Scale them down. Select both. Grab along the x-axis, drag them to the side here. So you want the bottom of this section here to be as flat as you can. Let's grab this one, bring it down here. Let's select these two using the Shift key, right click, subdivide. So let's grab this and put it closer to the center of the image here. And right click and hit subdivide. Oop, I don't want all of them. Let's click these three, right click subdivide. Let's click these two, right click subdivide, and right click subdivide one more time. So let's kind of make some ridges and bumps along here, some hills. Nothing too crazy. Okay, so we got this kind of French bread looking cross section. All right, tab out of that, click on the original, and under bevel here, choose object, hit the eyedropper, and select that weird object we just made. And let's see, rotate that along Z, tab, A to select all, rotate Z-axis, because we want that, we be able to see the flat of that. There we go. Tab out of that, click on our other curve here. Let's see, and let's straighten this out a bit. R, Z, rotate that. Let's take this one, hit E to extrude, drag another section out. E to extrude again, drag another section out. And it becomes kind of squiggly like that because when you create a new point, it's very close to the previous point, and it starts to wrap around very, very carefully. Let's take this end piece. Let's hold down A, hit S or Alt S. Sorry, scale that down a little bit. And what does this look like? This is starting to look a little bit like what is sometimes used in 3D art to make hair. In fact, I'll show you a video right now of a figure, of a head of a figure that I made a few months ago, which kind of used this style to make hair. Okay, now let's say we want to do, we've shown how we can manipulate the size of different points. We just hold it, Alt S, we can scale them up, we can scale them down, you can make horns, you can make pipes, things like that. But what if we want to make a gap? Well, by default, the normal curve, the regular curve cannot make gaps like that. But if we right click while we're in object mode, we can hit convert to and choose mesh. Now when we hit tab, we manipulate this as we would a mesh. So let's go to hit 3 to take us into face mode. And if we want to just delete a segment, hit delete and choose faces. And now we've got a gap. Now this can no longer be manipulated as a curve anymore, unfortunately. We have to manipulate it as a mesh. There are other ways to do this sort of thing with curves, and that's going to be done using geometry nodes, but that's a little more advanced, and I'll show that in a later video. But we got this hair here, and if you're interested in making 3D figures, you're probably interested in making hair. So I'm going to show you how to make a very basic hair shader. So let's go down here to the material properties in red, hit +sign to add a material slot, and click on new. And let us go into the shading tab to manipulate how this will look. And let's go for an indoor look. So if we go up here to our shading area and click on the drop down, we can change from this sort of outdoor scene to like an indoor scene. I do a lot of stuff with indoor scenes, so I tend to like those a bit more. All right. Now let's start with everyone's favorite here, the noise texture. Hit Shift A to add and then type in the search noise texture. That'll take you straight to the noise texture. And now let's hit Control T to add the mapping and texture coordinate nodes. And let's plug UV into vector instead of generated over here. And now let's hit Shift Control left click to plug the factor directly into the material output. And this will give us a preview of what this particular part of the shader is going to look like. Now, this is making spots. We want to turn these spots into stripes. So let's test that by manipulating the scale here. So let's try X. X makes everything squishier, so let's not use X. Hit Control Z. Let's try Y. Okay, these are getting closer together. This is becoming a little more hair-like. I like that. Okay, now let's hit Shift A and search and get to the color ramp. Drop the color ramp directly on the factor line and it'll automatically plug them in. Now let's pick the color for our hair. Let's see, for the darker spots, let's find ourselves a nice brown. Let's go over here, get a nice dark brown. And maybe more of a middle brown. There we go. And for the lighter stripes, let's go in here. Let's get us a nice, maybe not quite so vibrant of a blonde, a little darker than that. There we go. And if you want more dark, you drag this slider over and make the dark parts a little bit thicker and the light parts a little less shaded. And if you want more light, you drag this over, and this will help bring out the lighter parts. But I think I like this right here. Okay, this is pretty good. Let's plug this directly into the base color and then the BSDF back into the surface over here. Okay, so we still got some shiny bits, so let's bring the roughness up. So if you want really shiny hair, bring the roughness down, but if you want kind of a matte hair style, you want to bring it up. Okay, now the thing is, hair tends to be darker at the root and lighter at the tips, so let's hit Shift A and search for a gradient texture. And let's plug the same vector into this vector. Now let's give it its own independent vector. Hit Control T while you've got gradient selected. And let's hit Shift Control and left mouse button to plug this directly in. So we got the dark up there, light down here. But what we actually want is the factor. So let's plug the factor into the surface. There we go. It looks exactly the same, but the factor produces a value-based output, while the color-based produces a color-based output. Let's hit Shift A. Actually, let's go to our original color ramp and hit Shift D to duplicate it and plug that in. Now we want the roots maybe closer to the top, and let's bring up the vibrant parts up here. All right, now let's smoosh these two colors together. Hit Shift A, search for Mix Color. And let's plug that bad boy in, and let's plug the color of this other color ramp in right here. And then the result, let's plug into the base color and then the BSDF to the surface. And And there we have that so far. Let's make this color a little bit darker. Just a touch. This is really way too vibrant. And now let's adjust the factor. So if you want a little more darker, you can bring the factor up or bring it down to, and let's see. So not bad. Let's raise the roughness up a bit. Again, this is very bright, so let's adjust some of the colors here. Bring that down a bit, and bring this one down a bit too. And I want to see more of the stripes, so I'm going to pull the factor this way a bit. There we go. Now, hair doesn't follow neat curves like this, so let's add some bump. Let's hit Shift A, run a search for a bump node. Plug that in there. And let's take the factor from our noise texture and plug that directly into the height, and then the normal into the normal. Let's see what comes up. So the distance is very low right now, so let's hold down Shift, and this will allow us to make very fine adjustments to the distance. Also, let's raise the detail level a bit, because that'll give us a little more detail in the hair. That's better. Let's bring the roughness down just a touch. We want this, let's bring it up a little bit. There we go. Not bad, not bad at all. However, the hair also gets thinner as you get closer to the tip because there's a mix of short and long hair. So we want to represent that as well. So the principled BSDF has an alpha. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the gradient factor from our gradient, and we're going to use that in an alpha channel. So let's hit Shift A to search, bring up another color ramp. Right there. Let's plug the factor into the factor, and let's plug the alpha into the alpha. Now nothing is happening yet because we haven't added alpha to these values. So let's click on the white area, drag the alpha all the way down. Okay, so this fades off very quickly. So what we want to do is bring this, so this isn't actually producing color, it's just showing the alpha. So you want this to be mostly visible, but you want it to be kind of transparent near the ends. This is not perfect hair, I will say, but it is, some hair. So if we go back to our layout and bring us to material preview here, let's slap this on a sphere just for fun. Hit Shift A, go to Mesh, grab a UV sphere, and let's grab our hair, scale down the whole thing, grab it along the Z-axis, and let's tab into Manipulate, grab some different parts of the hair here. And you want it to actually drop in. Maybe have it stick out just a little bit. Let's grab, hit Y, and just, throw some hair onto an object just for fun. Tab to go out. And there you have it. So that is it for this video, and we'll be skipping lesson 2-5 because that involves shape ordering, which isn't quite as relevant in the 3D space. Instead, we'll be covering Blender's equivalents to brushes and styles covered in tutorials 2-6 and 2-8. And after that, I'll be getting back to making my regular videos in my new 3D set. Can't wait to show you the progress I've made over the past few weeks. Well, thanks for watching. Hit all the usual YouTube buttons, and happy animating.